South China Morning Post, 23 September 2022. If the U.S. needs Beijing, a Russian ally, to assist put an end to the war in Ukraine, why is it provoking China? The West's strategy appears somewhat odd to those who want to see the war in Ukraine end quickly, including many Chinese citizens. China, a Russian ally, encouraged the invasion of Ukraine in the hopes that Taiwan would be invaded while attention was diverted. Following a Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) conference in Uzbekistan, when Russian President Vladimir Putin underlined China's questions and concerns, Western media attention seemed more focused on causing friction between China and Russia than on finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict. This comes after a U.S. pressure campaign on China's unwillingness to denounce Russia, which consisted of a string of ham-fisted threats made worse by Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the U.S. House, visiting Taiwan. All other developments surrounding the SCO conference, such as the announcement of a truce between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan that may have avoided a conflict in Central Asia, and Pope Francis' offer of private diplomacy to Xi, were overshadowed by Putin's remark in Western media coverage. The comments made by Xi and Putin at the SCO were regarded as proof in Russia that Moscow still had Beijing's support. Meanwhile, the official Chinese media emphasized how the SCO meeting demonstrated China's status as an irresponsible global player. It makes sense that American politicians and officials compete to be tough on China during election years. Similarly, U.S. foreign policy established that it should be closer to Russia and China separately than the two are to each other in times of peace and conflict. The Sino-Russian alliance is perceived as dangerous via this ominous perspective, but it is less clear how Washington hopes to enlist China's assistance in the Ukraine issue while continuing its antagonistic and belligerent stance. Despite what the Western media has claimed, Beijing has not responded enthusiastically to Russia's special military operation announcement in Ukraine as many other countries have. It has also not been any franker in pointing out that pressing NATO's expansion to Russia's borders increased the likelihood of conflict than Pope Francis or political analyst John Mearsheimer. China has responded with threats, allegations, and purposeful provocations during a politically sensitive period instead of noting and applauding relative neutrality. Again, it seems odd to think that a campaign of hectoring and humiliation will protect those interests, given that China's purpose is not to uphold international law but to dominate it. Proposals for Taiwan's independence are more than just a touchy subject or a breach of Beijing's red line. Unification with Taiwan is a goal of the Communist Party. In light of this, Pelosi's visit and President Joe Biden's comments about the U.S.'s intentions to militarily defend Taiwan not only violate the One China principle, which has aggressively pushed countries all over the world to reiterate, or adopt, a pledge of allegiance to this policy, but they also thwart attempts to start rebuilding trust. China and the U.S. share a desire to advance world peace and prosperity, notwithstanding their disagreements and harsh language. Beijing and other outside parties must maintain a degree of relative neutrality and open-mindedness while acting with considerable delicacy and care if they contribute positively to ending the Ukraine conflict. Even under those conditions, it won't be easy to convince Russia to accept the pre-February Ukrainian border, given its pride, prestige, and resources invested in the country. Similarly, the chance of the West succeeding in its objectives is diminished by insisting that Putin be punished as a war criminal rather than simply supporting his peaceful transfer of power. A route that doesn't have any off-ramps is called a highway. The American approach to Taiwan is characterized by the same unyielding stance that Washington took over NATO's expansion, one that provokes and humiliates while claiming the moral high ground, and then pretends ignorance regarding the unavoidable outcome. Its ventures into Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya, among others, don't seem to have shaken U.S. confidence or forced it to act with even the slightest caution. I genuinely hope that peaceful solutions are discovered to ease tensions between the two halves of the Taiwan Strait and to stop the situation in Ukraine swiftly. Indeed, a Taiwan administration unfriendly to Beijing can be persuaded to adopt a long-term peaceful solution, much like how the anti-communist former U.S. President Richard Nixon's visit to Beijing changed U.S.-China ties. The world is aware that China is the main issue, despite China's tendency to portray itself as the hero to home audiences and other emerging nations.